welcome up to stage, please, Dr. Jason Price from Price Pirate, who'll introduce himself.
Okay. You may have seen me taking the photograph, so we're abound with technology. So you've just been tweeted to the world to say what a fantastic learning experience you're having here in Auckland. We have, following on from the innovation presentation, you have in your hands something which has the sum total of human knowledge, which people have never had access to before. What do people do with it? They look at cat videos and start arguments with strangers. So we're going to be talking a little bit about people and people and complaints management and the customers that we have to deal with. I look back at this, are you listening? I thought, well, that's actually a bit rude, really. I'm not referring to you, it's what you're doing with your customers. Seeing as you've got your cat video and argument starter in front of you, if you'd like to go to that website, polev.com/priceparrot with a double T at the end, my way of helping to keep you engaged. I'm not going to send around the collection plate. Henry did a great job on that one, but we'll be asking you for some input through the presentation. So the first 100 of you who get to the fingers first will get to have your say on a few things. And you should see a screen that looks roughly like that. Keep it to hand. We're going to start with doing a little bit of polling and just getting your opinions on some things that are going around. While you're doing that, I'll tell you what we're going to talk about. So we'll start off, thank you to those of you who responded to the benchmarking survey question around complaints management. We had some good responses. I'll go through that at the end. So I wanted to I did a couple of presentations on this theme around Asia Pacific, and we talked about a couple of things around the priorities for contact centres. So we'll see what you think, because we've got the cream of New Zealand's contact centres in the room here, so you get the chance to have your say, and we'll be able to share that information back. We're then going to talk about actually what the strategic value of feedback is. So let's get back into customer feedback. Where does it fit? Why do we need it? What's the purpose around complaints management? We'll talk about people. And we've heard a lot about technology, but ultimately it's the people that we're dealing with that we need to serve and setting that customer experience. So we'll look at some of the human impacts of how do customers feel through the complaints process, and what's the impact that has on your staff, and how you can deal with that in creating world-class complaint management. What is world-class complaint management? How does it work? Why do you need to learn from it? And then we'll finish off by actually looking at some of the challenges that you're facing based on the data that you provided to us with the survey. So the first question, priorities. I said Asia Pacific contact centre priorities because we want to see what your priorities are and how they compare to other people who were in your shoes in Singapore earlier this year when I was presenting at a conference there. I've taken the high-risk approach of using both interactive technology, audience participation, and relying on something live at the end. So it's taking Teresa's theme of it's all perspective. This to me is a challenge and entertaining, not a potential disaster. So in front of you, what is the most strategic performance measure that your board or executive team believe your contact centre would have? And we'll give you a few moments to just answer that. I did this presentation once and there was somebody who had just spoken from New Zealand Racing Board, and that was quite entertaining because they started running a book on the thing, I think, as it was going along. So customer experience is quite high. I'm quite disappointed that nobody's selecting complaints layout, which is roughly down in the middle. That's not an attempt to rig the vote. I'm just saying it's out there, it's interesting. So we can see. Interesting. So customer experience, obviously, we would expect to be the top priority. Sales, revenue, and profits, still up there. Customer experience scores. Okay, that's broadly what you think. The categories here, by the way, are from Dimension Data's 2015 survey, so you can go and look up their rather excellent benchmarking reports and see how we compare over time. That's what you guys think, if you remember the general pattern. Asia Pacific contact centres, roughly the same. Employee engagement was a little bit higher for them. So that's what you think there. You have 4%. The rest of Asia Pacific, there were 2 conferences that I attended, so that's the sum result. So other contact centres around the Asia Pacific region, customer experience is still a huge focus, as we'd expect. They were a bit more interested in complaints, which was entertaining and helpful. But we can see First contact resolution is also up there reasonably well. You've actually got sales. So we're still looking at sales down here and productivity above some of the other areas. So the next question, what do you think will be the thing, what will you do most to reshape the contact centre during the next 5 years? What's going to have the biggest impact, in your opinion, of those choices? Agent capability. Technology solutions. Social media is making a late surge there. I could never have been a racing commentator. Technology solutions providing a differentiator. That's interesting. Analytics. Lots of talk of big data around the place. Is it really part of your views as well? User behaviour. So what we've got in here, just while you make your final sort of decisions and selections on that, we've got a number of areas that are going to be relevant that we'll move on to talk about complaints. Social media is one of the areas we want to touch on because that has quite a big impact on the way we interact with people, obviously. And when we talk about complaining customers, it has a very big impact on the reputation and the work that you're doing. Technology still seems very, very high for you. That's what everybody else thought in the rest of the area. They were actually pulled social media up as their major feature. Customer analytics was second. And then changing user behaviour. So whatever the technologies we invest in, if people aren't using it and your staff aren't using it and customers aren't using it, as we've heard throughout the session, then actually technology, there's a formula somebody once gave at a conference, said NT plus OO equals EOO, which is new technology plus old organisation is expensive old organisation. So unless you actually do business change, what you have is a much, much faster lead weight on the desk that people are not really using to the greatest potential. So we can't overlook the people dimension in what we do, as we know. Thank you for that. Let's go back we'll talk about actually customer feedback. Where does customer feedback fit into what we do as an organisation? So I just want to set some context here. Every organisation, whatever business you're in, whether it's private sector or government, we have a business cycle that we work in. So your organisation will have a strategy and it has structures and processes that it puts in place to make that strategy real. People then follow some form of organisational procedure or practice, and this is what actually creates, at the end of the day, the service delivery experience, the customer experience that we're talking about. So the moment of truth when people are following those procedures, whether it's a script or using their own innovation, to actually have and create a customer experience. Now, some of those customers will give us feedback. Does anybody want to guess at roughly the proportion of customers who are dissatisfied who will actually make a complaint? Would you say, who thinks it's under 10%? A few hands going up. Who thinks it's 10 to 20%? A few more hands going up. Over 20%? No optimists in the room, that's good. Talking to some organisations, the research has said it's between 5 and 10% of people who are dissatisfied will tell you that they've made a complaint. Talking to some big organisations in New Zealand, like ACC, I think, and Inland Revenue, that can be as low as 1 to 2%. Or even under 1%. So when people are measuring complaint levels, take the number you get, multiply it by 20, because that's at least the level of dissatisfaction that's out there. So people who talk about reducing complaint levels, you're actually on the wrong start point, is the message we'll be giving you. Customer feedback comes in various forms. We have compliments, we have comments, and we hope to have some complaints. What's the purpose of feedback? The purpose of feedback is to help us do some form of continuous improvement. Now, not all organisations get here. You may collect data, and we can all think of a few where we filled out the form and then nothing happens from the feedback form, but it's valuable feedback and they value our information. Are you then using it for continuous improvement? Well, you can look at what you need to do to make improvement happen, but until you actually make improvement, and that means making changes to either your strategy, your processes, or your procedures, nothing is going to happen and nothing is going to get better. So this is a cycle that we need to think about as we go through thinking about the role of customer experience and where complaints and feedback play. So we're going to look at that bottom corner down there in customer feedback. Why do dissatisfied customers not complain? If only one in 10 is going to complain, there's been some research done. So what I'm putting up is some data from research papers out here. The primary reason is the time and effort that's involved in making a complaint. That's the reason why dissatisfied people choose not to complain in this research. The second reason is service provider responsiveness. What's the experience like of complaining? How easy do you make it? What's the response that you get when you make that complaint? And then the third most important factor is when we start to get into personality type and preference. So when you're talking about customers as just being, customers may be awkward, it's actually the third thing that stops people complaining. And the point here is that 1 and 2 on that list are entirely under your control as an organisation, either through the structures or the processes you have or the attitude that your organisation has to complaints management. So you can make it as easy as hard or hard as you want to learn from people. The benefit of learning from complaints as an organisation, there was another study done, looked at the concept of what they call defensive organisational behaviour. So this is about culture. I like this quote because it actually takes it down to you're creating a culture of whether complaints are something that are awkward, difficult, painful, and hard to learn from, or are they opportunities for you to think about, to actually find out ways that you can do things better and improve that customer service, in which case you want to encourage dissatisfaction. You shouldn't be looking to get the number of complaints down, you should be looking to get the number of complaints equal to 100% of dissatisfied customers. Then everybody with a problem has told you and given you the opportunity to fix it, and that's where you're going to get learning. Commonwealth Bank have done that very effectively in Australia. Just by changing the attitude and not being afraid of seeing the complaints numbers go up. I think it went up from 20,000 a month to 80,000 a month. But they now say, well, that's 80,000 opportunities to learn. The thing is, their upheld complaints with the Ombudsman haven't changed, but their customer satisfaction went from number 4 to number 1 over the same period. And that's all down to the attitude of Rob Kenner, who came in at their customer service centre. So the benefits of your learning from complaints, you get improved reporting from customers. That gives you information to help motivate and empower staff to make change. A contact centre, your staff are always looking, crying out for things that they can do to make their lives easier. They're the ones at the front end. If you want to give them ideas, this is a way of helping them to do that, and you get some evidence for that. We have evidence of the value of service changes that we can use to make the business case where we actually have larger projects that we need to, when the accountants get involved and we have to start spending money on things. So the context there is to start thinking about feedback is an opportunity to learn rather than paying money to get customer satisfaction surveys. You've got people providing you free opportunities, free information on how you can make their lives better and how you can make the experience better. Let's think about the human dimension. What happens when somebody is making a complaint? Customer complaint, a service failure happens. And what we're going to talk you through, all of the links on this slide are from research studies that have actually drawn one conclusion or another, and I've kind of pulled them together and plotted them. So as service failure happens, a customer experiences dissatisfaction. We're not that happy about things. If we're dissatisfied, our intention to switch, if we're in a private sector environment, goes up. So we're more likely to go away. A number of us will choose to complain. If you choose to complain, you have the option to put in, you've got the choice to fix things, to have the recovery response put in place. There are 4 factors when you put your recovery response in place that from the customer's perspective have been shown to affect their satisfaction with the outcome. That is the speed with which you respond in their terms. Remember, when they made the complaint, not when you received it, is when they started the clock. Perceived justice, how fairly do they think they've been treated in the response, the quality of the response that you put together and how that works, and also the employee attitude of the person dealing with them. Those are the 4 main things that will affect whether or not a customer is satisfied at the end of their complaint outcome. If you get it right, customer loyalty increases. Increased customer loyalty means increased customer retention. Increased customer retention means people are more likely to buy products and services from you. Companies that have greater retention and loyalty are more profitable because it costs more to recruit a new customer than it does to keep and sell to an existing one. Customers also exhibit positive word of mouth. They tell you good stories about what's happening. Companies that constantly have a positive word of mouth and people think of as a fantastic have a better corporate image. Organisations that have a corporate image engender better customer loyalty. So you're getting into something of a virtuous cycle around the back there. You're also more likely for that customer to tell you what happens next time. Their likelihood of complaining goes up, which is what you want. You want them to help you fix the problems. So next time there's a service failure, you get an opportunity to fix things, and you're getting more information. If it goes wrong in that recovery response, dissatisfaction moves to anger. We have probably all dealt with the angry customer on the phone. Anger is kind of linked to the ears and the mouth. One shuts down when the other one's going. So angry customers don't hear. They are even more likely to switch to a different provider. They are less likely to buy from you. They are going to have an effect on your employees' morale because emotions are contagious. People pick up on things, as we'll see in a minute. And they will engage in negative word of mouth. Companies that engage in have customers engaging in negative word of mouth have a poor corporate image. And a poor corporate image is not, you're on a losing battle before you start. So that's really the cycle of what happens. So now down the centre there, it all hinges on the recovery response and what you do. Assuming you've got it wrong in the first place, how you fix the problem and what you then do to learn from that problem is going to affect the image of your organisation. Social media, I just want to touch on social media and angry people because one of the great advances of social media is it's given everybody the power to do something instantly, like I've just tweeted my photograph of you before we started out here. So before I've had time to actually think or consider anything, I can tweet it to the world and I can get instant feedback from all the other dissatisfied people in the world who react on the spot. What do you end up with when angry people and social media get together? Well, here we go. I don't need to say anything more. We have a living case study that is just going on day by day, and it's frankly interesting to watch. The beauty of the internet, it's one thing to be cautious of when you're thinking about social media. How do you handle social media complaints? Remember that you're not actually in control of the internet. Whatever the message you want to put out and the image you want to put out, what's going to happen is what the public wants. The internet has a great way of leveling things. So be very careful because you're not in control all the time, and the internet will do what the internet does. So social media as a growing influence, something we've been talking about in technology, is something you need to think about, and don't be Donald. The implications of all of this for managers when you're dealing with angry people, and I focus on that because it takes out the pause. Complaints, it's about pause and having time to think things through as a customer and as a respondent, and social media reduces that time. So the implications for managers of your staff, if they're dealing with this, the consequences of anger for staff, miscommunication, hostile disposition amongst people, a loss of self-esteem, actual personal self-esteem and respect for others. If you've got people who are working in a tough environment on a tough call centre line, they get hit hard and it affects them. So you have to put support mechanisms in place for those people. That leads the human reactions you get from staff. It's emotional stress. You'll see that coming through in absenteeism. You'll see it coming through in a lack of commitment. A lack of commitment actually has been shown by research to translate to a lack of quality of customer service. So you actually get the impact of service quality going down, which makes customers more unhappy, and you're back into this circle of negativity and emotion feeding it. So you really need to take cognizance as a manager of the views of your staff, of how staff are working with complaints, how they're treated, all of those training programs that you have in place to deal with emotions. You're dealing with people in very emotionally charged situations. Now this also affects, as a manager, what you need to think about. If we want complaints to be a learning opportunity, we've got to look at whether or not those staff are actually going to help us learn from complaint management or not. And there was a study that was really, this is a really interesting research paper that I've used as the basis for some of the benchmarking that you participated in, looked at whether or not people chose to share learning and information about complaints with their managers. In this particular study that was done, 21% of people routine reporting, things that go through the process, were kind of reported. But what we're talking about is the intelligence from things you've learned, not whether or not they've followed a prescribed process. It may all go through. But what about the informal complaints? What about the things where you've given people the power to solve those problems at the front line, which is good practice? How do you learn what the underlying issue was to fix it? And where do you get it from? 37% of people in the study did some form of informal reporting, and they had a conversation with their manager. They may have chatted about what the learnings were. 16% engaged in what was the study looked at as optional reporting. And what we mean by that is effectively the view that they have of whether their manager wants to hear it was affecting their decision. And we'll touch on that in a moment. So think about your reaction when somebody says, hey, I've just had another complaint. If you roll your eyes and go, oh, another one, oh, another difficult customer, how likely is that person to come back to you? Because probably in all good spirited intention, that my manager hates hearing about complaints. So you've just shut off all the learning that you'll get as an organisation from learning about those. 26% was avoidance. In 1/4 of incidents, just over, no indication was given that any information was passed to management. So employees have used their discretion based on their judgment of whether or not you as a manager want to hear it, to decide whether or not to share the information. It might not be a bad thing. This isn't about employees doing bad things, because if you've empowered them to solve the problem, they might be thinking, oh, well, I've fixed it, I've done my job. But unless you've got a culture that says, no, the complaint isn't fixed when you've solved the problem, it's when we've shared the learning and we've got all the other evidence out of it, you're going to miss opportunities to learn. 79% of whether or not you hear about the opportunities to learn is down to the discretion of the employee, how they feel, how their last call went, and what they think your attitude is. And that was the other major finding of this particular study, the extent to which employees perceive management as standing behind its messages affects their decisions and behaviour. That is everything that Henry just said in his presentation about the standard you set. People are not watching what you say, they will follow what you do, and they will follow the standard that you set. So as managers and leaders, if you want to create a complaints learning culture, it starts with you thinking that complaints are a learning opportunity. That's where it all goes. What does complaint management look like? World-class complaint management. There's an international standard, and in about 2 seconds you're going to get the chance to tell me what you know about it. ASNZ 10002 is the international standard for complaints management. It's been out since 2006. It was fully revised in 2014. Previous presentations I had this slide up, the first one saying never heard of it, and then I realised I'd mentioned it just before, and so everybody's technically heard of it. But how many of you are actually aware that there's a world-class standard for complaints management? Somebody did pick me up on it, that's why it was I had to put it in. Excellent, people have heard of it. I can tell you, thanks to, I had I'm going to engage in negative word of mouth. I had a small dispute with Standards in New Zealand about their licensing policy recently. Standards Australia are much more helpful, which is slightly depressing. But actually, through an Official Information Act request, I can tell you that Standards New Zealand in the last 3 years have sold a grand total of 42 copies of the International Standard for Complaint Management. That is frankly abysmal. Because this is standards are there to tell us how we can do things well, and it's a very, very good piece of work. It's the underpinning basis for the assessment that we did. So, hey, 2% underway. You're actually doing something. People have read it. That's a good start. What is the standard? I'm glad that was quite high on the top one, because otherwise this becomes a very short presentation from here on. What is ASNZ 10002? Let me tell you about ASNZ 10002. It's been completely rewritten from the ground up in 2014. There are a number of chapters that you need to know about. 1 to 4 are all the preamble and bits and pieces. Chapter 5 is about the guiding principles. What are the principles that should apply to a best practice complaints management framework? It should be free to use. It should be easy, open, accessible, transparent, all of those kind of things that you as managers need to know to put in place. Chapter 6 talks about the framework. This actually goes down to the level of naming responsibility and accountability for roles and responsibilities in the complaints process. So what does the Chief Executive need to do is section 631. It takes it down to all staff. Everybody is covered in that standard under four main roles. The Chief Exec, the person responsible for the organisation's complaint management framework, the managers in operational departments, and all staff. So there is nobody that can't learn something from this standard. And it's explicit. It's always good fun having a conversation with the chief executive where you hand it to them and they go, ooh, and then you hand it to all the staff in a training workshop and they all start asking the chief exec whether he's done things. So it's quite a powerful change motivator as well when you use it in the right way. Chapter 7 is about planning and design, the requirements for how the framework should be established, how it should be resourced, what you need to put in place to make sure world-class complaints are run effectively. And Chapter 8 tells you what those 9 steps of a complaint process should be, from first contact and dealing with it informally, right through to actually step 8 is, closing the complaint is not step 9. Learning from the complaint and systematizing your learning is step 9 of that process. So a complaint isn't shut when you've solved that issue. A complaint is shut when you as an organization have learnt from the trends behind those complaints. And Chapter 9 tells you all about how to do that. So it talks around the kind of data, the kind of analysis, the monitoring, the audit, the review of the complaints process. It is a part of your ISO 9001 quality system, for those of you who are ISO 9000. The 10002 standard itself isn't auditable, but it is a contributing piece of evidence to 3 parts of a 9000 formal audit, for those people who are thrilled by discussion of audit standards. The real value of this standard is in the appendices. What they've done, it's different from the version that's on the ISO website over in Switzerland. It gives you detailed techniques and examples. If you want to, so rather than just saying you need to do root cause analysis, you go to Appendix K, I think it is, and there's a whole 4 pages on here's how you do a root cause analysis. So as a standard, as standards go, for those people who've ever read a standard and just before you want to fall asleep, it's actually a very, very practical handbook for starting to get some things done. And if anybody wants to know more about getting copies of the standard, I can help you with that. So that's what it means. It's the guidebook. It's the reference guide for how to achieve world-class standards. Now, what were the challenges that you face as Contact Centre Institute New Zealand? We did the complaints management assessment is the survey that you completed. So I've just completed this assessment process with individual clients, so with Inland Revenue and with Microsoft in Australia and New Zealand, looking over their Asia Pacific contact centres. So what you did was completed the 56 question benchmark survey. So thanks to those who stuck with it all the way through. I think 81 started and 59 of you got there through the 10 minutes it took. So that was helpful. We took the 59 and we took that as reliable data. So it tested 5 best practice aspects. When you were filling it out and you're thinking, what the hell are all these questions about? We were looking for 5 different areas: customer service culture, leadership and commitment, the policies and procedures for complaints, what your experience is and testing your attitude, and then complaints as a source of improvement. And there's statements in there, positively worded statements, designed to test your attitude. And what we do with an organisation is we do that across all of the managers and employees, because we know that managers influence employees, so we want to try and differentiate the views, and we look for a vast gulf of difference. So if all the managers are saying, yes, we're really positive about complaints, and all the staff are saying our managers don't care about complaints, you have a problem to look at in your organisation. So that's how we use the data. Do some analysis against the research and the 10002 standard itself, and then we'd come up with some findings to help you. So we're going to do the last bit now. And here's what happened from the actual survey results. So, if you give me a second, I will just switch to the actual results. And I am mirroring my Retina display. Tablet reader. Well, I will be when it arrives. There we go. Brilliant. So what we have here in... Brilliant, there we go. Right. Sorry about that. Thank you for bearing with me. This is the results that you completed. So those of you who filled out the survey, we had a range of respondents from contact centres across Auckland, which were, as we would expect, mainly financials. We have financial services, is based in Auckland, as we know, and a range of other areas. And you can see the size. We actually had a very good spread of different contact centre sizes that were completing it. Wellington, the home of government, is the home of government, as we might expect, with slightly smaller number of seats and so on. We had a few others that were out there. So we've got a reasonable range amongst the respondents there. We also had, I did look at the manager and employee split. So the majority of you who completed it are, by nature of the members, managers in customer service. So about 75% of respondents were managers. So of course the opinions here are slightly skewed to your views. So how did we do? The percentage score you're seeing there, what I do with it, just to explain what I do with the survey results, all those strongly agrees that you did, same principle as Net Promoter Score. So we take, for all of the questions underneath each of those sections, we take all your strongly agrees, and we take them away from all your strongly disagrees. We also take away the don't knows, the reason being the standard says you should be aware of in a number of places. Therefore, don't know means ignorance. Therefore, that's not a positive contributor. So we do treat don't know as a detractor in the calculation. And the end result of that is you get a percentage score like you would with Net Promoter. So what we've just done here, the darker blue ones, we had more respondents. So you can't see the number, it's 42% there. So for financial services, we had 11 people respond on behalf of a financial service organisation. And that's where you sit. So if you're in government, people think government call centres are not. It doesn't necessarily say you're not doing as well. What it says is you disagreed more with those statements, and the statements that were in the survey, which we'll come on to and have a look at some of the specifics, they're positively phrased. So you would expect the results effectively, you can go from minus 100% to plus 100% if you were strongly agreeing with everything, and that's intended to be an indicator that yes, we're following the standard. And we're agreeing with the points that are made there. So you can start to see there is quite a wide spread of actual commitment and commitment to complaints across the industry sectors across New Zealand, which always makes for a more interesting presentation than everything going straight down in one line. How did you do compared to, we'll look at the averages. So the section averages, this is the actual breakdown here. So for all respondents, you can start to see these are the 5 sections we looked at: customer service, leadership and commitment, policy procedures, personal experiences, and then some questions about improving from complaints. And you've got the greens, strongly agrees over here, less green, neutrals, and then the reds and the don't knows on the end. So you've got positive and negative on either side of that score. So you can just see visually here, actually customer service, leadership and commitment, the net CMA scores in the middle have been pulled down because we've got that influence of negative or disagreement with some of the statements that were in there. And we'll have a look in a minute at the underlying questions and which ones jumped out and what that might mean for you. Improving from complaints was another area. When it comes to personal experience, and this is kind of what you'd expect for all professionals and people think we're doing the right job, it's actually people are quite positive when they're asked, well, I do the right thing. It's the organisational issues about my organisation is equipped for, which we were seeing some of the disagreement in. And that's where, so the intention of this is really to give you a bit of a guide as to where should you start to look with armed with a copy of the standard to make improvements. Because if you want to make improvement, there's an awful lot of scope to start. So actually, let's use this to focus in on the areas that are more of an issue. The SOCAP is the Society of Consumer Affairs Professionals in Australia. That's basically complaint managers and contact centre managers who are really interested in the complaints process. You would expect them to think they do quite well because a whole chunk of them wrote the standard as well. And Australia, SOCAP's really been leading. So their results are in orange. I just thought it would be useful. This is the second group I've done it with as an industry group. So that's where we sit. Contact Centre Institute is in the blue squares and SOCAP is in the orange circle. So again, it doesn't mean you're necessarily doing bad. It means you have a lower opinion of, or you are more realistic about the areas that you know you have weaknesses in. You can look at it in a number of ways. But it is interesting here that, actually in terms of the questions about what you do personally, and that section, it's pretty similar on the range of scores. There's not nearly such a big gap as improving and some of the other organisational areas. So yes, Haig was asking me, how are we doing compared to other people? Well, there we go. That's the best data I have on that at the moment. If we look at the individual areas, I put some questions. Do we value complaints would be the first question I'd be asking, because based on this results, here are some questions that jumped out at me. So question 1, question 3, really good. I would describe our organisation as customer focused. 81% net, 72% net said, yep, we take complaints seriously and we do it. When you're asked whether the organisation values and encourages complaints in the middle there, you're starting to see more disagreement. So you think your organisation's customer focused, but it hasn't quite got there on valuing complaints, and that's an indicator that maybe our culture isn't quite there. You can start to look. So it's giving you something to start to look at. And we also have down here senior managers promoting importance of complaints as a way of improving service. That was an area that dropped down. So again, the leadership point, it's what senior managers do and say and are seen to do in your everyday culture that's going to make the difference there. If we ask the question, do we make it easy to complain? What can we see from that? Well, in section 1, this was the big area down here. Question, do you regularly survey your customers about satisfaction with the complaint process? Are you checking out how easy it is to complain? No, is that particular answer. We regularly survey customers about, organisation regularly publishes information, best practice complaints performance. That's best practice. Telling people how well you do at complaints, and more to the point, what you've done to learn from them. So a really good example, if you want a local one, is Waitemata District Health Board. They did a review of their complaints process, Sir Ron Patterson did it. The year later, they have published a quality accounts website, and on it says, we do continuous improvement. It's not a bland statement. They have a list of the projects they're doing. They have a list of the improvement projects that they are making that directly result from learning from complaints. So that says to your customers, hey, they're actually doing something about listening to it. They're valuing the feedback, and they're making attempts to learn from what we do. We had our next point was, the next question I just want to check, are managers committed? As managers, you're all managers in the room, you're the people who are doing it, are you really committed? Because in a lot of these questions here, you can just see the level of red has crept up. There's more disagreement amongst yourselves and the other people that answered it. My manager regularly discusses complaints and complaints performance with me. The culture of learning from complaints is how are we doing? It's where are we going on the trends? What have we learned about it? So a positive complaints culture will be talking around learning, around discussing that. Department has assigned staff. This kind of question here is really interesting. If you do it within an organisation, that's where you're looking for where employees are at one end of the scale and managers are at the other. Managers think they're doing beautifully and all the employees go, no, this is bad. So you can have that kind of conversation about where to improve. Clearly define policies and procedures. So all of these questions were designed to test different aspects of the 200 odd points in the standard. The last point, do we monitor complaints well? Because I think a lot of organisations are monitoring what they need to do around complaints. Financial services, for example, you'll be absolutely ruthlessly good at managing your compliance levels on complaints because you've got a regulator watching you. What do you do beyond that? And the answer very frequently stops dead as well. We don't really have time. That's a description. We don't have to do it. We're not told to do it by the regulator. Therefore, why would we? Is the thing that comes up. But some of the questions here. So we had equal levels of agreement and disagreement on whether or not you have effective technology to allow you to track the complaints. And if you haven't got effective technology, you can't, of course, monitor, evaluate, and report effectively on your performance at managing complaints. But even if you haven't got technology, even if you're doing it on Post-it notes or written forms or an Excel spreadsheet, what do you do to talk about it, to learn from it and get the trends analysed? Because if you're spending money on improvement projects, you want to base them on actual problems that you're serving, and your complaints data is the source for that. This one's always interesting. Our complaints policy can be easily found by customers and other external parties. First section of the standard, it must be easy for customers to find it. Could you find it? I tend to go on people's website and just Google, search, use the search tool and hit complaints and see what comes up. Try it with MB, it doesn't work. There's nothing there. I fed that back in my discussion around complaints. The last point was, are we learning and improving? This is the whole theme of the standard. What are you doing to learn from it? What are you doing to take things on? Regular audits of the complaint process. Section 9 does include something around that, saying you should make provision, whether it's an internal or an independent external audit. Senior managers receive reports and recommendations on improving your complaints performance. What are you doing next? You're 33, so about 40% of respondents disagreed that was happening in your organisations. Senior manager reporting on the finding. You tend to see in these surveys a bit more of the don't know. because for a lot of people, well, it's outside of my sphere of job influence. The way I kind of look at that is, if you had a positive culture and people were telling you what they were doing about it, you would have heard it somewhere, because it would have been in the chief exec's briefing or your senior manager's monthly report that said we've learnt from things, or even if you follow White Matter's example on the web page. The other good example actually is UK Revenue and Customs, HMRC, put a thing up every month called You Said We Did. It's a plain English PDF that they for some reason bury on their websites, but it's just up there. It says You Said, and there's one sentence on what people have asked for, what we did about it. You said you're waiting too long for your passports, we put more people on, and now we've cut the wait times by 20%. So you can actually draw those direct conclusions and that direct evidence of we make institutional improvement to make your lives better as a result of the feedback that you give us. And you're clear and open in plain English with the customers about that. For everybody who completed it, thank you very much for your support and help in doing that. And it's the first step to making progress, is understanding where you're coming from. And I'll be talking about how we can make that more available to people. So that was the last of my slides on there. I will just go back. So that's the results. That's a whistle-stop through best practice. I don't know if we have any time for questions now. If not, I'm certainly around for the rest of the evening tonight, so I'm more than happy to take questions there. It's a presentation about complaints management. I can't not ask for feedback. So there's a link there, the bit.ly/CCiNZ feedback. If you want to tell me what you thought of my presentation, you can do so at that poll if you want to, as well as the feedback forms that you can now complete in your rush to get to the bar, probably after the panel, of course.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.